Okay, and just like that, ladies and gentlemen, we are live here in the workshop at Eric Schaefer Guitars. I'm going to get to your questions. I do want to say that the hands-on guitar building workshops for spring are just around the corner. There's still one spot left in the April 28th to May 6th class. So I just wanted to point that out to you guys. I also wanted to say that because those workshops are just around the corner, I have to put on hold all of the wonderful instruments that I was working on this winter. I'm going to pause those for now. You can actually see one of them on the wall right behind me. This is one of those parlor guitars that I was working on. This is the Wengi one, number 86, guitar number 86. So that's on the wall back there. Obviously it's not complete. There's no bridge on it. It doesn't have a finish on it. There's no frets. You can't play it. But it'll look pretty on the wall for now. I've always wanted to actually have not a wall hanger guitar, because that always implies only ornamental value, but I wanted a guitar to put on the wall right in the busiest part of the shop here, because it's just kind of cool for me personally when I'm working here in the shop and in between shooting videos and this and that, to just have an instrument ready to go right there on the wall that I can always just grab and mess around with a couple chords or riffs or something like that during my work day. So that's a little something for me, okay? Just treating myself. So with that said, let's go ahead and, oh, one more thing. I have 3 Radial Rosette makers left. I'm pointing this way because I'm pointing at my car, which I can see through the window. I just loaded those up into the car so I can bring them home with me this evening. And that way, when you guys buy them, myself or my wife can drive out to the post office and ship them for you. But there's only 3 Radial Rosette makers left from this batch that I did. So once those are gone, it might be a while until I have the Radial Rosette makers available again. That's just how it is when you have a product that you produce entirely yourself in your shop here in America. Rather than, say, outsourcing the whole thing to another company or to China or something like that. All right, let's go to your questions. Pulling up my trusty phone here, and here are your comments. Let's go through them. Let's find some good ones. David Harris writes, I have a question, Eric. How did luthiers cope without a fancy binding channel jig? Some of them are ridiculously complicated, makes me want to get a grommet and do them by hand. Let me first address that question by pulling out a grommet and just showing you guys what a grommet is, for those who don't know. Alright, so this is a grommet, and I also brought an 1/8 of an inch chisel with me, just to make the point that with these 2 tools right here, I can cut my entire binding and purfling scheme with just these 2 tools. And I've done that before, just for fun, to try it out, to learn something, to be able, basically to be able to talk about it with you guys, because I do have the binding channel set up. It is better, it's more repeatable, it's quicker, but this is very doable, and might I even say enjoyable. The one time that I did this, I really enjoyed it. It was a little nail-bitey. You know, I always felt like at any moment, especially when I was doing the chisel portion, at any moment, a little slip could cause some serious damage outside of the binding and purfling area. In other words, on the, visibly onto the top. And it never happened. I did very clean work, but the whole time I felt like it could happen at any moment. So that's the only downside I would say is, even with a lot of skill, it's something that is you're going to have to really focus and pay attention while you're doing it. And so for that reason, it kind of takes a while. But again, very enjoyable. So what a grommet is, essentially it's a scoring tool, not that different from a marking gauge, you know, something like this, but the grommet here has a flat side, and you can take this apart and orient it and then put it back together, and then you would have this curved side, which is great for getting into the waist, right? Because you can't reference off of the flat part of the sides in the waist area with this non-curved portion, okay? Anyway, I'm not going to totally bore you with explaining this. I mean, you can figure it out if you're really into it. You can look up, LMI sells this particular one that I bought here. You can look this tool up, and you can cut binding and purfling channels all by yourself, and it's not too expensive to do it. It's very simple. You just have these two tools. That was not your question, though. He's saying, how did... Oh, no, that was your question. I'm sorry. This is how they used to... He kind of answered it for himself because he mentioned the grommet. This is how people used to do it, okay, before the fancy binding tower jig setup. I will say, though, that I do recommend, if you know you're going to stick with guitar building, maybe professionally, maybe not, but at least you're going to continue doing it, and you're going to build more than just one or two guitars, then it totally makes sense to just get the upgrade right from the beginning and get a binding tower set up. Okay? All right. Declan Murphy, I don't know why I said that funny. Declan Murphy writes, I tried a simple steam box for my first build last year, but couldn't get even temperature throughout the whole guitar side, and it cracked. Then I tried the pipe bending method, a blowtorch and scaffold pole. Soaking the piece in water and beforehand soaking the piece in water beforehand helps a lot. I did get some charring on the waist bend. Yeah, so the moisture component of bending, whether you're doing machine bending or hand bending, is often overlooked but very critical, and you will ruin a piece of sides if you ignore moisture altogether, I would say. So on certain very easy woods, you can get away with no moisture, but even then it makes sense just to spritz the wood. So the moisture component always comes down to one question, essentially. And that question is, am I soaking, like what he was talking about in here, or am I just lightly spritzing the wood? If the wood is figured, then you are for sure going to be lightly spritzing the wood, because that figure, all of that straight grain with alternating end grain, actually starts to make the wood less stable while bending rather than more. It starts to come apart. So any kind of figure on your sides, just spritz it, don't soak it. And you didn't have a question there, but I'm glad to hear, Declan, that it sounds like you nailed it the second time. And you did get some charring on the waist bend. That's okay. You know, every now and again I get a little bit of charring. Sometimes it gets a little bit too hot. As long as it's no deeper than just the absolute surface, then it's fine. Okay? And often it will be just that, and it'll just sand off when you're sanding back the binding. If it's much deeper than that, though, then of course the side is ruined. Ted Robinson writes, sound is very subjective. As a builder, your likes and dislikes evolve over time, as does your craft. I have my guitar I built that sounds better than the Martin, but I still love its sounds. Better is not a good word for guitar sounds. Yeah, so this is a response to a previous comment that he made on a different Q&A that he used, where I talked about how where he had mentioned that his guitar, the guitar that he had built, his first guitar, sounded better than his Martin, and he's just following up on that. And I agree that better is never maybe not never, but generally is not a good descriptor. You know, you can say it has more bass response, which generally more bass response for a steel string guitar is desirable, okay? But depending on what you're trying to do, you might want something else. You might want more projection or more treble response even. If you're building, say, an archtop guitar or a flamenco guitar, you're building with a completely different goal in mind. So better ends up being subjective in the end, okay? In fact, even a steel string player might desire a very bright, kind of brash sound depending on what they're trying to do. Okay, let's see. Thank you, Eric. I like the color of the rosewood. Well, thank you. He's talking about guitar number 106, which is on the shelf for now. I'll be finishing that after the classes, so sometime in June that guitar will be done. Oh, this one's good. Jonas Kelander writes, "Hi Eric, thank you for the effort of making the craft more available. One thought about naphtha, as often used to clean wood over there, as we say in Sweden," so he's talking about over in America, "what we refer to as lacknafta," I'm not sure how to pronounce that, lacknafta, in Swedish is a solvent-based product to clean brushes when painting with oil-based colors, and it smells bad. What I understand from StewMax naphtha is that it's not a petroleum-based product, so is it alcohol-based? Seems to be a substitute for a lot of nasty stuff, so to source it in Europe, what am I looking for? Take care, Jonas. Okay, Jonas, that's a great question. And I got a similar, almost identical question from someone else earlier this week. And I shot him a quick answer back because he was in the members forum and I wanted him to get the response pretty quickly. But I'd like to address this here too as well. The other person was asking from the Netherlands. He's asking from Sweden. So I didn't realize this, but apparently there are a lot of different options when you're purchasing mineral spirits or naphtha. Two different things, by the way, and they're not the same. But in the Netherlands and in Sweden, and I'm sure in other places in Europe, there are many different options. Let's take mineral spirits, for example. There's many different types of mineral spirits. I think they often call it white spirit there, or turpentine. It's two different words. So it gets very confusing overseas when you're looking for this stuff. Let me grab my mineral spirits and naphtha here. All right, so here's what I'm going to say about this based on my limited knowledge and experience. And if there's anybody out there with some more experience with chemicals and things like that, please chime in because I'm just doing my best here. So this Jasco odorless mineral spirits is what I buy here. It's available everywhere. I mean, you go to Lowe's or Home Depot, which here in the United States, there's a Lowe's or a Home Depot in every city, and often, you know, small town even, you can find a Lowe's or a Home Depot. It's just our big department store for lumber and tools and different things like that. And this Sunnyside naphtha, same thing. It's also not the same thing. I'm saying same deal. It's also very common, easy to find. And I don't know exactly what you need to use in Europe, but I can tell you how to find it, and that's to locate the MSDS, which is the Material Safety Data Sheet. You can just get on your Google sticks and type in MSDS for Jasco odorless mineral spirits. Okay, that full name there is important. Odorless mineral spirits. In fact, the odor part is even important because the aromatics that are in other types of mineral spirits are more caustic. So you want to find Jasco odorless mineral spirits. And on that MSDS, it will give you a list of all the materials in there. What I saw when I looked up the MSDS for odorless mineral spirits, there's one ingredient, and that is hydrotreated light distillate of petroleum. Okay, so this is a petroleum product. And that one ingredient has a CAS number, and that's what you're looking for. Okay, I forget what CAS stands for. The C is chemical, and the A and the S are something else. Regardless, you're looking for that number. Whatever that number is, you want to look up a product near you and compare that CAS to the ingredient or ingredients in the Jasco mineral spirits. Okay, so that CAS number, I think, is going to get you there. Again, this is just me doing my best. Like, I never had this problem living here. Mineral spirits, I really never even questioned it. Honestly, I've always bought this same type, and I never had any issues from it, so I never had to question it. And same with the naphtha. I've never strayed from these two types of mineral spirits and naphtha. Okay, so I hope that helps. Jasco odorless mineral spirits, MSDS material safety data sheet, and you're looking for the CAS number. All right. Okay. David Harris writes, great video, Eric. You made me chuckle a few times with all the information and history around building. I'm certain the learning curve has been reduced. I already had the skills. I will give it my best shot with the time I have left. Thanks, Eric. Number 2 is in development as we speak. Mahogany/German spruce D28. Oh, that's awesome, man. Well, that's great to hear. Thanks, David. That's a response from the previous Q&A I did. And glad to hear that number 2 is in development. B. Detchen writes, which finger plane do you use for brace carving? Okay, let me go grab them to show you. So I like these 3 right here. Of course, I also use a chisel. Most of the time I'm using a chisel. But when I reach for the finger plane, I almost exclusively reach for either this 25 millimeter Ibex finger plane. It's actually more technically called, Ibex calls it an archtop carving plane, okay? And that's because it has a radiused sole on the bottom of the plane, which actually really helps when you're using it. This is a larger version of this that I have, and I actually very rarely use it. So I will say, when you look up Ibex archtop carving planes, you will notice that they have 3 different sizes. And I find personally that 95% of the time, the only one I want is this 25 millimeter, which is the smallest one they sell. Okay, so this larger one I would say you don't need, but it's nice to have. And then lastly, and this is kind of like a you might as well because they're so cheap, is one of these little Mujing Fang, MUJINGFANG, that's the company. Mujing Fang thumb planes. I've seen them for anywhere from $8 to $22. So very cheap for a plane, or really for any woodworking tools. If you can spend $8 to $22 on something useful, that's incredible. So this is a bit larger, of course, than this, and other critical difference is that it has a flat sole, which sometimes you want, particularly when I'm putting a bevel on the tops of my braces at the end of carving the tapers. Okay, 25 millimeter archtop carving plane, Mujing Fang thumb plane. Next question. Love your Q&A series, Eric. However, it should be pointed out that not all makers dome their tops, as seen with Jim Olsen and Kevin Ryan, to name 2. Yes, this is true. I will say, I don't mention this, by the way. I'm aware that I didn't know that Kevin Ryan did this, but I'm aware that Jim Olsen doesn't dome his tops, and that very rarely some other people don't dome their tops. But that is, in every case, it's the exception that proves the rule. They're actually doing different things to make that work, and it's rare enough. It's just a small handful of professional premium builders that are actually doing that intentionally. It's small enough that it only distracts from my key point to bring up those iconic examples. Okay? I hope that makes sense. Well, what we're talking about here is I have answered in several Q&As actually the question about flat tops and why flat tops are not truly flat, right? The flat top guitar, which that one behind me is a flat top guitar, the top is actually domed a little bit. And that's, in normal cases, it's absolutely critical that you do dome the top. But yes, there are exceptions. This one's good. Riley Connors writes, I have seen other builders glue their wood binding and purfling laminations with Titebond 3 to deal with the heat and moisture during bending, since it is supposed to be waterproof. That is a great tip, actually. I think I might give that a shot, actually. So what we're talking about here is when I make side purfling, so binding strips with just a little, in my case, a little strip of maple on the bottom, I glue that binding strip to the purfling lamination using Titebond Original. And as I've talked about previously, very rarely I'll open up the bending machine after it's done being bent, and one of those binding strips will have delaminated a little bit, thus ruining that one strip. But it's rare enough that it's not really a problem. I just throw out that one. That it might be one every like 15 or 20, maybe even 30 strips. Like it's a very rare event. So it's kind of not much of a problem. But I could see how Titebond 3 could help with this, actually, because so not only is it waterproof, but it also has a longer set time. So I'm not sure if the longer set time would also help with that, but it might. So just to give you a little background on Titebond, Titebond Original is what most luthiers who are using, what is that called, PVA glue? If I'm wrong about that, I think it's called PVA glue, but I might be describing the wrong type of glue. Most builders who are using Titebond, let's say, are using Titebond Original. Titebond 2, if I remember correctly, is the one that's waterproof, right? And then Titebond 3 is not only waterproof, but it also has a longer set time. So if you're doing a really big glue up and you need a lot of time to get all the clamps on there, it's good to use Titebond 3 so that you can take advantage of that longer set time. So yeah, that might make sense with binding and purfling. I'm going to give that a shot, Riley. Thank you. Okay. I think that's it. I think I'm pretty good right now. I think that's enough questions. I'm going to end it there. So yeah, I'm going to finish prepping some parts that I was working on for the spring workshops, and then I'm going to go home because it's late in the day already. All right, guys, I hope you learned something here. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now. If you learned something here, please give this video a like and subscribe so you can be notified when I release a new DIY guitar making video. And if you want to really learn more, take one of my structured online courses at ericschaferguitars.com or register for a hands-on guitar building workshop here with me in Burnville, Pennsylvania.